right, let's enter the main event, folks. Welcome to our Ask Me Anything Young Adult Pride panel. We have 4 glorious humans joining us here today to share about growing up queer and their journey in writing young adult novels. Please join me in welcoming Erin, Jeremy, Sasha, and Will. Give them a round of applause. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them, and then they're going to introduce themselves. We're going to start off with Erin Goff. She is a fiction writer whose award-winning work has been published globally. She is the author of 3 books for young adults. The Flywheel, which won the Ampersand Prize. The Amelia Westlake, winner of the Readings Young Adult Book Prize and the New South Wales Premier's Ethel Turner Prize for Young Adult Fiction. And Into the Mouth of the Wolf, winner of the Davitt Award for Young Adult Crime Fiction. Put your hands together and welcome Erin Goff. Erin, would you like to say a little bit on the microphone, introduce yourself, say hi?
Oh, look, thanks very much. It's great to be here. Stanton Library is one of my favourite all-time libraries. The staff here are incredible, and we always have so much fun here. So it's really wonderful to be here and to see you all coming out on this cold winter's night. Really appreciate it.
Next up, folks, we do have Jeremy Lachlan next to me here. He's a former bookseller with an honours degree in creative writing. His debut novel, Jane Doe and the Cradle of All Worlds, has been published in over 15 countries around the world, translated into 9 languages, and was the 2019 Australian Book Industry Award winner for Book of the Year for Older Children. Put your hands together and welcome Jeremy Lachlan. Introduce yourself, say hi to the crowd.
Hi, everything Erin said. Happy Pride. And I'm actually wearing my library socks. It's like a library. And that's all I have to say, but looking forward to all your questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next up, folks, we do have Sasha Vey. She is an Australian author who enjoys writing about the everyday dramas of teenagers experiencing the often messy transition into young adulthood. Sasha's debut young adult novel, The Setup Girl, was released in 2025 and was a CBCA notable for older readers this year. Please join me in welcoming Sasha Vey.
Thank you. Hello, and I feel like the best stuff's already been said, so thank you for having me. I'm really excited to get into the questions.
Just wanted to give them all a chance to talk to the microphone because sometimes it can be a bit daunting, just warm up a little bit. Last but not least, folks, we do have Will Kostakis. Well, Will was just a teenager when his first novel was released. We're talking, what, 5 years ago, Will?
6.
We'll go with that one. He's been writing and rewriting ever since. His latest novel, We Could Be Something, a heartfelt intergenerational coming-of-age story, won the 2024 Prime Minister's Literary Award for Young Adult Fiction. Please welcome Will.
Hi everyone, I will probably speak too much tonight, so I will shut up now.
I like this. Now, folks, you do have a bit of paper on your chairs as well, so if you have any questions for our panel, please feel free to write them. You can hold them up or even just pop your hand up and we can get to that. But I do have a large bowl of questions to get to. Are we ready? Everybody ready? All right. These were originally in a jar, but they didn't take into account my very subtle jewelry, so we've moved into a bowl. All right, our first question of the evening, and feel free, any of you can answer this or multiple. Would you ever consider writing a straight protagonist?
I mean, I have my first novel, it was a 17-year-old closeted kid writing a book. And whenever I say I wrote a first book at 17, please don't think I'm some prodigy. You can tell a 17-year-old boy wrote it. It's just boob joke, fart joke typo. But the thing was, it was a straight protagonist, but it was a girl, so that I could write about my same-sex attraction, but in a safer way. But I read it back now, when I was writing, I'm like, oh my god, I'm so subtle. Now I read it, it's like every female character reads like a drag queen. Complimentary. And I'm just like, oh, okay, cool, I was not subtle about this at all. And I thought, oh, and she's got this love interest named Tim, who's kind of like me. And then, if you know your YA fiction, you know Melina Marchetta. One of the first things she said to me, she came up to me, she's like, William, I liked your book. I especially like the gay character Tim. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's...
You've been clocked, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anybody else want to contribute to that question? No, don't worry, I've got plenty more.
I think going forward, maybe depending on the story, but at the moment, no. But it's interesting, kind of the same as Will. When I first started writing Jane Doe, I was deeply closeted, and I thought that and a lot of people don't know that for the first 6-7 years of writing my series, it was called Finn Pigeon and the Cradle of All Worlds. The hero of the story was a boy. I felt that making Finn gay would effectively out me to my family and friends, and I wasn't ready for that. So I figured just some supporting character, would be gay in there somewhere. because it took me so long to write the first book, in that time I had since come out to my family and friends and became more comfortable with my sexuality. And then once I finished the draft, I started sending it around to publishers and agents. And one of them said that because it was a boy-focused adventure, it should be very much younger middle grade, simply because that's what was selling well at the time. She wanted me to halve the book and get rid of all my favourite moments from it, really tone it down. I didn't want it to, it was turning into a story I didn't want it to be. So that's the moment where I thought, well, if you're going to take this logic that I don't agree with, by the way, I don't think there are boy books and girl books. I think they're just books that we can all read and love and share and all that kind of stuff. But I thought if you're going to take that logic that this boy folk should be very much younger middle grade, if I make it a girl-focused adventure, if I have a female protagonist, does that mean I can keep the length and all the scary moments in there? I tried it out and Jane left from the page in a way I wasn't expecting. Then there was the whole thing of, well, if I've changed the main character from the boy to a girl, do I change the love interest from a girl to a boy? I tried for about 10 minutes and realised that Violet just did not work as a boy, and she was also one of my favourite characters and a favourite character for readers as well. So I thought, okay, this is my chance. Now that I've come out and I'm proud of my sexuality and everything, I can have a queer romance bubbling away in the background, and so that's how it came to be.
Interesting. All right, folks, our next question is, can you share a writing hack or tip for when the words won't flow? Or are you looking for a writing hack or tip when words won't flow?
Oh, look, I just try to get the words down and try to tell myself that it's okay if they're utter garbage, because even when you have a really, really terrible 5 pages, it's so much easier to make those 5 pages good than make a blank 5 pages good. And I just feel as if actually there's a point where you get to where it's like, okay, I'm just going to edit this sentence to make it better. And then you go, okay, well, I'll just edit the next one to make it better. And then you put it away and then you come back to it and go, it's still terrible. Oh my God, this is garbage. And then you go through the process again. And okay, maybe you do it 5 times, and if it's still garbage, that's it, you throw it away. But at least you started that process, and very often you can hone what you started. And I think something that I learned from an author that was visiting Australia many years ago, she said something that really kind of illuminated things for me. She was like, the thing is, you can write a book, but then if there are things that aren't working, you can fix those things. You don't have to keep the whole thing holus bolus. You can actually break it down in parts and figure it out and put it back together again. And that was really helpful to me, because I kind of had this idea that to write a novel, you had to write a perfect novel and every word had to work. And knowing that I could kind of pull it apart and put it back together again was really useful.
Yeah, I think that pushing through the fear of the words being bad is such an important part of it, because once you've gotten to the point of, with a manuscript, writing multiple drafts, suddenly you realise that it's actually okay if you needed to chuck out half of the whole thing. So even if the words are bad, that's fine, the words are there, and then you can shape them and do something with them. I will say, do not project hop like mad. That is a lesson that I have not learned yet, but it's a great way to lose momentum on a story, and sometimes you just gotta keep pushing. And I will say as well, I will have days where the writing feels so bad and so hard, and then I will reread that manuscript later, and I can't tell which were my bad days and my good days. All I can tell are the flow of the story and the words that I've actually gotten out. So push through is the advice, I think.
Persevere, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, our next question, I'm pretty sure all of you will have something to say about this. How do you plan your major points of tension in your novel? Do you develop them spontaneously, or do you have more of a rigid plan that informs your writing process?
So probably many people in the audience and on our panel are familiar with the kind of popular dichotomy of writers. People like to say there's 2 types of writers. You're a plotter, or you are a pantser. You're an architect, or you're a gardener. Basically means, do you like to sit down, you know what's going to happen from moment 1, you've got it all tightly plotted, you know your points, you know your characters, or are you vibey? Are you going in, you've got some ideas, you've got some characters? I'm very much the latter. So with big moments, I will often find I am writing and my characters are doing things, and then I think, oh my gosh, where are they going with this? And it will kind of hit me, and I'll think, okay, that's it. That's where I'm going with this. This is the point. So I write in a way that surprises myself. And that's my favorite way of writing, though I don't know if it's always a functional way of writing.
That way sounds absolutely terrifying. So I found my first book, I plotted everything out extensively, and that didn't work either. It felt like a checklist. So what I seem to have found is I have my moments. Every 10,000 words, I know what my big moments are that I'm working towards, and I have to know my ending. And then I kind of pants between them, but there's like a very rigid guardrail. If I'm writing a scene that's not getting me towards the next milestone, then it goes, or I add something in there that is kind of inching towards that. And I find that way I get the best of both worlds, but I don't just disappear up my own ass, just writing these like waffly things that don't need to be there.
I'm a plotter. Hello, my name's Erin, and I am a plotter. It has been,
Hello, Erin.
It's been probably 10, 15 years since my last pants. I've tried pantsing. Nah, it doesn't work. I spent 8 years writing a novel once using that process, and it was never published because it was terrible. So I plot everything to the death, but what that means is that I also have to be, a bit like what you said, Will, I've got to be flexible around stuff that doesn't work. So I'll plot it all out, but what I'll find is that the points of tension, sometimes they're not in the right place, they're not where you think they were going to be. And also, they're generally, if it's me writing, they're not tense enough, because I tend to underwrite points of tension. And so, for example, I will have two characters punching each other when actually they should be shooting each other in the face with a shotgun. I've really got to deliberately escalate the tension when I'm writing to make it sing. And I think you get to a point where you know when it's singing, and when, like, even you as the writer is reading it back and going, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. That's when you know that you've nailed it.
Yeah, I'm also very much a plotter. For me, it just happens, but it's all in my head. Like, it's just one thing that just kind of explodes very quickly, very early on. Like my series of across the 4 books, for me, the 4th and final one came out in September last year, and it was close to 19 years since I came up with the idea for the series. So it's a long time to have that story in my head. The epilogue, like the very, very final chapter of book 4, didn't change over the course of time. So I knew where I was going to all that time. But as you've been saying, like, there were times where some things weren't quite working. You have to be flexible and stay in the chase. You have to adapt as you're going through. So a little bit of both, I think, is healthiest.
So it's 3 against 1 is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Next question, folks. Have you ever had a book crush?
You mean on a character in a book?
I assume so, yeah.
Or a crush on a book?
A crush on a character in the book?
I mean,
Yes. Oh, yeah, you go.
no, because I'm well adjusted. But oh no!
Thanks, Will.
But look, I want to, like, the only time, like, I really feel it is if I'm writing it, if I start to get that, like, swoony feeling, and I'm like, oh, okay, like this, I could see how this could work for someone. But when I'm not reading, I'm like, oh my God, you know, this accumulation of letters, oh, it's getting to me. I'm like, no, so I can't.
So one of the first queer YA books that I ever read was a book by a British author called Julie Burchill called Sugar Rush. And it's got a character in it whose name is Sugar. And the protagonist, who's like a first-person protagonist, she is completely obsessed with sugar. And throughout reading the book, I too became completely obsessed with Sugar. And Sugar's one of those huge personalities who was always getting in trouble and, you know, doing naughty stuff, and like was totally bad news. And I was completely in love with her. And I was like, I've got to write one of these. See if I can. Yeah.
I think that the topic of like fictional crushes and book crushes entwined really interestingly with my sort of coming to terms with my own sexuality.
This is what I want to ask.
Yeah, because as a teenager, you know, I'd often read books. I've always loved reading romance. You know, I wrote a romance. I love reading romances, so I'd always gravitate to books with a heavy romantic subplot to them. And as a teenager, you know, I would have these really complicated relationships with these male leads. because I couldn't tell whether I, had a crush on them or whether I had a crush on the relationship they were able to have with the female protagonists. And so that was, and because I'm bi, it was sort of this really weird mix of both sometimes. So that was sort of a way, an early sort of complication, I guess, of coming into my identity was working out how I actually was relating to these characters.
Can I want to jump ahead.
We got the chance to put a question here. I might jump ahead to mine as well, so you can scrap it if you do pull it out. But it's kind of connected to this. My question, I said, like we all as queer people have those characters. Not necessarily mine weren't in book. It was film and TV. Those characters that form part of your queer awakening. And my question was, which characters are part of your queer awakening? Like for me, it was very much. Robin, Chris O'Donnell as Robin, is that I think that's a solid choice. I mean, I'm not alone. I know. And also Rick O'Connell in The Mummy, the most bisexual movie in existence. I think a lot of people, that was an awakening for a lot of people with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz in that film. So they were kind of my two big ones.
Yeah, look, this is going to age me, but I have to be honest. And again, it's a British reference. I fell madly in love with a character called Linda Day, who was in a British television show called Press Gang, which was about Press Gang. Oh my god! So the guy who went on to write Doctor Who wrote Press Gang. What's his name?
I don't know, but it was Spike.
Yeah. It was Linda and Spike, and that was like the key love affair sitting at. So they were student journalists at high school, and they broke heaps of excellent cases. And Linda was like this strong, complete, like she was the editor of the magazine, and she was such a bossy pants, and she was so fantastic. And I became completely obsessed with the show, and I think that was the beginning of the end.
That is so you.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't. No.
Yeah, I'll say I actually really struggle with this one because I don't. I can't pick specific moments or characters. I think and some of that as well for me links into the ways that I suppose as well queerness is depicted on screen and in media generally. I often found it unrelatable, and so I struggled to have all my aha moments really came from life, more so because the things that I saw reflected were not necessarily reflective of the queer people I knew or the queer person that I was growing into. Yeah.
All right, our next question has come from the audience today, and I think it's going to be a nice, easy one for you to answer. Do you think every character would be hotter if they were a dragon?
Yes. Next question.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Look, that's actually the big editorial note going around in publishing at the moment, where you finish writing a contemporary novel, it's really heartfelt, and they're like, yes, but can they be dragons?
Yeah.
And can they be unambiguously sexy? And it's something we're all really wrestling with at the moment.
We'll get to the answer of it one day. All right, next question. This will be interesting. Who are you inviting to your literary dinner party?
These guys.
Oh, what a cop out! What a great answer.
That's such a lie.
Do they have to be alive?
No.
Okay.
You're not
sweet.
actually going to invite them, so yeah, it could be anybody.
Okay. I would go with. I'm just going to go through like my childhood, and I would go with Enid Blyton, just because I know that she's problematic in terms of the books, but I think that would be like an interesting conversation. But that's not an endorsement. Then I go Terry Pratchett, who I met once and was really sweet to me, which was really nice, and someone that I actually have the pleasure of knowing. Like there's this, I read a book called The Whole Business with Kifo and the Pitbull when I was in high school. Terrible title, terrible cover, but I read it and it just bowled me over, and I was like, this is the kind of author I want to be, and that changed the trajectory of my life. And 2 years later I had a book deal, and 5 years later I had met the author Barry Johnsberg, and it was one of those times where I met an author and I'm like, oh my god, you're not a disappointment, like some of my other childhood idols who I won't mention because this is being recorded, but he was like really generous, really warm, and will phone me on random days and we'll have the best conversations. And yeah, I'd have him at the table too.
I mean, I don't know if I should answer now because I also monopolised the dragon question. But I think Terry Pratchett is a great call. Diana Wynne-Jones would be wonderful to have at the table. And then two slightly more esoteric people, I would say I would really love to talk to Cicero, the ancient Greek orator. I studied him in university, and he just seemed like the most obnoxious person you would ever have met. And I would love to talk to him. I think he would piss me off so much, and I love that. And same with, I would love to talk to the librarians probably at the Library of Alexandria, who are consolidating versions of the Homeric texts. Because how do you do that? Anyway, that's my incredibly, incredibly nerdy answer to that question.
Look, I just want to have a one-on-one with Ali Smith, the Scottish author, because she's amazing. She's queer. She's writing literary fiction today, so she's alive. That's a bonus. And I've got lots of questions for her.
I think Agatha Christie would be cool. She's a badass. It would be cool to just sit down. And I want to watch Lord of the Rings with Tolkien and like stare at him to just see what his reactions are. He may hate it, but yeah, I think those two.
Jeremy, I've got a question for you. Have you ever had to edit the queer aspects of your stories for overseas publications or something like that?
Yes, I feel like that's somebody who knew. It's an excellent question. Yes, I have. I was very fortunate when my first book, Cradle of All Worlds, came out, or before it came out. It was kind of picked up by multiple countries around the world. It was really exciting. One of them randomly was Russia, which I was very surprised about. And we were getting closer and closer to the publication over there, and I reached out to my publishers because I knew about the very strict anti-gay laws they have over in Russia, and I said, are we okay about this? Because in the first book, it's really just a hinted crush bubbling away in the background, completely age-appropriate, all that kind of stuff. It obviously increases as the series goes along, but I said, I don't want anyone to get in trouble with this. They reached out to the publishers over in Russia, and they got back, and I really felt for them because they said, look, yes, it would be great if you wouldn't mind tweaking the story. And I actually reached out to Erin. I reached out to two authors. One was Patrick Ness, who I know, and he's obviously has a very big name around the world. And he was like, I'm sure you wouldn't mind me saying, he was like, no, I wouldn't change it. I would stick to my guns, and that would be it, which I completely understand and respect. I talked to Erin as well, and you kind of had more in line with my thinking, which was if everybody said no, what about the queer kids over there? Do they then get starved of all of these stories? Isn't it better to find a way of writing and tweaking it just a bit so it can fly under the radar, not alert the powers that be, but still find its way over there? So I did that, and Jane and Violet are just really good friends in that. But I left as a little coda hoping, because so many people don't read the acknowledgements. I have this running gag in my acknowledgements where in the first book I say, I thank my future husband who I haven't met yet, and how dare you not be here for this, you owe me cake, lots of cake kind of thing. I now have a small army of children around the world wanting me to get my shit together to find a man, but that's okay, that's another story. But I left that in there, just hoping that maybe some kid or teen will read and get to that bit and realise, oh, hang on, maybe I was right. And actually just last month, I haven't told you this, a Russian reader got in touch to say that they'd read the first book and felt that there was something going on between Jane and Violet and was surprised, just something didn't quite add up. And they researched and found out that what had happened, and then bought all the series in English to read them, which was lovely. On the flip side, sorry, I know I'm talking too much, but I was also published in Hungary. A lot of people don't know that their leader Orban is just as bad as Putin, and they have just as strict anti-gay laws. I just saw today that I think he's out now, just very recently. My translator in Hungary had been blacklisted over there because he'd done a picture book about kind of a trans allegory for a horse wanting to be a unicorn kind of thing. So he knew all about this thing. My publishers in Hungary didn't want to change a thing. They decided to stick to their guns and keep the book as is. But get this fun, rollicking action-adventure novel with this same-sex romance bubbling away in the background. In Hungary, my book cannot be sold within 200 metres of a church or a school, which is a very effective way. In a city like Budapest, there's a church or a school literally on every block. So it's basically like, but I'm so proud of the publishers for sticking to their guns. Obviously, like I haven't earned out, obviously, in Hungary, but the fact that they stuck to their guns and did it just meant the absolute world. So yeah, it's very, very tricky.
I have a local story just to sort of show you how far we've come in terms of local publishing. I mean, we talk about these far off places, but when I wrote the first third in 2012, I was becoming more comfortable with my queerness, and my first book had flopped, so with my second book I'm like, I'm going to add a queer character in there and then that'll be cool. And I modelled him on one of my closest friends who is gay and has cerebral palsy. And one of the big editorial notes from the publisher was, Will, does he have to be both? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, he's gay and he's disabled. Like, does he have to be both? And I'm like, well, yes, there are queer disabled people. And it was about sort of dealing with that sort of image-obsessed, queer Sydney sort of scene, and him wrestling with that as a disabled teenager. And I'm like, no, this is what I want to do. And for that to happen, we had to age him up to 18 because he could not so much as kiss a boy, right, without being 18, and that meant aging up all the other characters in the book to match it. And I'm really glad that I did that. So the book wasn't 100% my vision. It was like 98. It was like, and then if he hooked up with someone, he could not hook up with anybody else, and then they had to then land themselves into a committed relationship by the end of the book. So there couldn't be anything remotely realistic about exploring yourself as a teenager. But I was still happy that I went over that line. And then the pendulum swung, and now publishers are like, make it gayer, which was great. But well, not now. About 2 or so years ago, we've seen the pendulum start to shift back a bit, where the same publisher who asked me, oh, Will, you have to make sure there's a queer coming out in each of your books. They then asked me the question, oh, Will, are there any queer characters in your new book? And I said, not openly. And they said, good, education will be happy about that. We are seeing, even though we don't have a politicised education system, we are seeing that sort of censoring before it gets to the kid. We are seeing that fear. And I was talking to a bookseller just last week in Tasmania, where it's like, there are some queer books that I really love, but I'm really worried that if I give it to a parent, they're going to complain and bring it back and then never visit the store again. And I want to be the reason why somebody doesn't come back to a bookshop, an independent bookshop. And so it's this really horrible line that we're straddling at the moment, where especially in kids and YA publishing, in the era of heated rivalry, we're still, and an era when kids are searching for queer content online and on Netflix, we're also having to police it here and be very, very careful. So, but we're still in a far better place. No one's asking me to unqueer characters or choose between that and disability, which is a small step in the right direction.
All right, I have a lighter question for you all now. What's your favourite writing outfit?
The comfiest, coziest outfit ever. Yeah, exactly. Precisely. The heels and everything.
It's velvet, it's comfy.
I can be found in bed when I am writing. That is the place you're most likely to find me. I've got a little fluffy pink headband with a bow on the top, and I'll have my baggy shirt on, and I will be literally in bed. I think you've got to be as comfortable as possible because you're really going through it on the screen. Anyway.
I wear aspirational gym gear, so when I finish writing the scene, I will then haul my ass to the gym.
Yeah, I'm just like pajamas from head to toe and then Blunston boots so that I can put the garbage out if I need to.
Yeah, it's whatever I wake up in for this. Yeah.
All right, folks. What was the first young adult novel that had an impact on you, and what made you want to start writing young adult?
Yeah, look, this is such a cliched answer at this point in Australia's history, but it was Looking for Alibrandi. Like, it's just such a pivotal novel for so many Australians, and I think also Australian writers of YA, except for Jen, who's never read it. I've just been informed. We will discuss this later. I read it when I was still at school. It had come out a few years before, and I was just like, like, to me, what was so amazing about it was that it was so relatable. It just felt like my world, and that is what I think really good contemporary Australian YA does, and why it's so important, because we read so many stories from other places, and Australian writing doesn't get the support that it deserves, and it is so special to see yourself on the page.
I also, it's a much better for me, but it was on the Jellicoe Road. I remember I was at a sleepover and I woke up first because I am a morning person. Terrible of me, I know. And it was on my friend's side table. So I just picked it up and started reading it while my friends were asleep. And then I kept reading it, And I remember I asked to borrow it, I took it home, I finished it, and then I started again. And one of the things I found so impactful for me about that book is it was one of the first times I'd read a book where you had a protagonist who was prickly and difficult and in some ways unlikable, and yet she still had this beautiful found family and people gave her chances again and again, and she also had to, when she was, pushed things too far, she had to walk it back, and it was just, I'm in love with this character, and it's definitely influenced the way that I write, because I remember having a conversation with my editorial team where they were saying, in this moment, Sasha, this character is quite unlikable. And I was like, yes. Yes. So I've actually had to tone that down a bit, but I love when prickly, difficult characters are given their moment to shine. So that was really impactful for me.
Okay, folks. What motivates you to write young queer adult novels specifically, and what do you appreciate about the genre and writing for it compared to other genres?
I think what's really motivated me is that I didn't have a queer young adult title to read when I was that age. They existed, we were never shown it. When we were given the Shakespearean sonnets in Year 9, they waited until the last one and were like, oh, surprise, most of these are about a guy. And, there was that, we never really interacted with queerness. And I remember, obviously this is the early 2000s, a very different media landscape where I felt incredibly alone. And the really wonderful thing is that I have the chance to write that role. If a kid picks up my book, and they're at that impressionable age, they can read it and see a path forward for them. I also understand I'm the middle of 3 gay sons. Everything my mother touches turns to gay, except my dad, she touches him in the leagues. But I remember when my older brother came out, his coming out, it felt really familiar, because it was like, did you ever watch the coming out on Dawson's Creek? Mm-hmm. When Jack was like, Dad, say it, you don't love me anymore. And then I watched my brother just be like, Mum, say it, you don't love me anymore. And I'm like, oh my God, you're just copy pasting this. And that's why whenever a publisher's like, we'll make the coming out bigger and more traumatic, and I'm like, no, because then I know that some teenagers will just rinse and repeat. Or there are some queer novels where I won't name names, but you begin reading it and it's always framed in a way that's like, which queer character is going to harm themselves in some way because they hate themselves? And it's like, that's not how I write Greek Australian stories. So if I'm writing a Greek story, I wouldn't sit there and go, I secretly love tzatziki, but I can't tell anyone. And I'm gonna keep this inside. Oh, it hurts me. I hope Mum doesn't know. And sometimes I'll watch boys in the corner eating tzatziki and I'll be like, I wish I was like them. And then one day Mum will sit down next to me and go, William. And I'll be like, what? And she's like, Oppa. And I'm like, what? She's like, Oppa. And she starts crying and smashes a plate. And I realise I truly belong. The end, right? But that is how we are encouraged to write queer stories, where it begins with a character hating themselves and hiding themselves, and then slowly coming to terms with themselves, realising they're okay, and then the story abruptly ending, right? I'm really fortunate where I have the freedom to write queer stories where the character can be openly queer at the beginning and we can explore the other facets of the queer identity. And the hope is that, I can be part of, I hope that the queer kids who rise up and then start writing queer YA look at my books and go, oh my God, they're so old school, right? They're dealing with things that we don't have to deal with anymore. And I hope that, all of us are part of a legacy that, lights a way forward for young Australians.
Beautifully said, Will. Yeah, all of the above. I also was just really keen, because I'd written this terrible novel that I was telling you about. I was pantsing for 8 years, right? And I was like, oh my God, I need a break. I want to write something fun. And at the same time, it was around the time that, you know, I was finally out in the world and feeling comfortable about it. And similarly to Will, I saw that there was an opportunity, and it seemed as if publishing, it might be something Australian publishing might just be okay about. Like, when I wrote my first novel, there were very few and far between gay YA novels, and so I was very much motivated by writing the book that I wanted readers to be able to read in a way that I hadn't been able to read. And then I suppose when I wrote my book, and I deliberately wanted it to be a comedy, and I wanted gay people to be enjoying themselves in the novel, because that was quite ridiculously revolutionary at the time. And then once I'd written it, it was just so fabulous to connect with a younger readership and to see what that novel meant for young audiences. And I feel as if, as YA writers and middle grade writers, we have that opportunity in a way that perhaps you don't get so much if you're writing for adults. I think people can get transformed by books at a certain age in a way that is life-changing, whereas once you're a cynical adult, you know, you might read a wonderful book, but you forget it 2 weeks later because you have a terrible memory because you're old now. And I think the other thing is, and like you talked about YA being a genre, but it's actually a readership, right? We're full of many genres, and we kind of, write in different genres. And that's been fun as well, to be able to do different genres. So I like to talk about the fact that my first book was a romantic comedy, my second book was a satire, my third book was speculative fiction, and also a crime novel, which I didn't really think about until I won a crime award for it. So it's kind of like, there's a lot to play around with, and with the same readership, which is, really exciting.
Yeah, by the way, if you haven't read Into the Mouth of Wolf, it's over there, you should get it because it is wonderful. I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, for me, when I sat down to write Jane Doe, I write for kids, teens, and adults. One of the things that bugs me about publishing is where it's kind of segmented. You write for this age to this age and everything. And I look at film, which I grew up being a film geek and still am. And you see these big budget movies at the film and at the cinemas, and everybody's going to them. It's not a question of, this is for this age to this age, and that's the spirit I wrote my series in. But the thing that fuels me, as I'm sure it does for all of us, it is when you hear from the readers who have really responded to that element of the story. Mine is queer normative, so Jane's a lesbian in the series, but it's never the coming out. It's not a coming out story. She's going off on these kick-ass adventures and saving the world, and she just happens to be queer, kind of thing. The thing that has fueled me going through this long process of writing the series is hearing from the students who have just felt really seen. And I know we all have those stories. It's the girl after a writers' festival session coming out to me saying, my books gave her the courage to come out to her family, which I get emotional even thinking about it. Like that, it tops absolutely everything else. I received a letter from a young woman in the UK, 18 years old, through reading my books, because it was a queer normative story, realised that she had feelings for her best friend and told the friend. She felt the same and they started going out. It's those kinds of stories that fuel you through because it's a very lonely profession, what we do. A lot of the time it's just us sitting alone in a room or in bed. Support your life choices. Writing these stories, it takes a lot out of us, but it's hearing those responses that just make it all worthwhile, absolutely.
It must be very, very rewarding. All right, well, this next question is probably for our aspiring authors themselves. How do you come up with the ideas, and do you give every idea a fair shot to become a novel?
I'll just say quickly, mine came to me. I was in the Cairo Museum and I started to think about I often get a bit lost in those environments, cave systems and forests and museums, because they have that labyrinthine quality to them. To me, that's when the what if questions come, and it's those what if questions that really inspire me as a storyteller. What if I took a wrong turn? What if there was a cave in? What if this painting came alive? When I was in the Cairo Museum, I started to think, what if there was an infinite labyrinth between worlds? What if it was known to an entire civilization? What if they'd worshipped and journeyed through it for thousands of years, returned with tales to tell? But what if one day it stopped letting them inside? And what if it was because of a child? And that was immediately, I knew this is the story I was going to tell. And that's been what I've been doing for the next 2 decades. I've now got a new one, but yeah, I haven't had that thought of, I've never had to abandon a story that I've started yet, but I know you've had that and that. But I'm not saying it's not too good. Like, I know it'll happen at some point, and I hope I can meet it with the courage that I know you did.
Look, I have so many ideas on my computer that I would like to explore one day. What I tend to try to do, and I'm very privileged to be in the position where I've now been working with the same editorial team on 4 books, so I'm writing one at the moment, which is the 4th, and the other 3 is same publisher. So it means that when I have a stupid idea, I can email them and say, what do you think of this? And I can trust them enough that they will write back and say, that's a stupid idea. Don't do that. I guess the moral for me is to test your ideas as early as possible so you don't waste time on them. Obviously, there are things that, not everyone's right about stuff, but maybe if you ask 10 people and they all say that it's a stupid idea, maybe rethink it.
There's this weird thing that happens to me if I start writing or I start thinking about an idea. It becomes the way that I look at the world, if that makes sense, and then the idea tends to grow. And I remember before I started writing We Could Be Something, I had 2 germs of an idea. One was I wanted to write about Mum worked a lot when I was a kid, so there was a period when my brothers and I lived with my grandmother while Mum worked. And I wanted to write a joyous story about growing up in my grandmother's house. And then the other story I wanted to write was, I want to write about how weird publishing is and what a strange experience it was for a 17-year-old, and how the small cruelties that I'm kind of immune to now were just horrible to experience as a kid, and I had no protection. But none of them felt quite good enough. And then in the height of the pandemic, my mum calls me and she's like, William, something's wrong with your grandmother. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, just something's wrong. And within a week and a half, we had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And that was something that bowled me over. It's something I was like, I don't want to write that story about being happy with my grandmother anymore. And complaining about being an author, that kind of feels really trivial. And so I was stuck and I didn't want to write anything. And then a couple of weeks later, my mum calls me and she's like, William, I don't know what to do. And so, brief family history, when Mum went out on her honeymoon, her brother passed away. And so Mum was like, you know how when my brother died? And I'm like, yes, I'm familiar with the law. And she's like, yes, so when Theo died, my grandmother, pretty conservative Greek, so you have 4 kids, 3 of them are daughters, 1 of them is a son. When the son dies, it's like you've got no more kids. And Mum was like, I saw the light go out in her eyes. She was gone. And then I had your older brother. And the moment she held him, I saw the light come back. Her raising you boys brought her back. William, I'm too old to have more kids. How do I bring my mother back? Because I'm losing her again. And I'm sitting there on the phone in the corner of my apartment during COVID, and I'm just like, I can't comfort you. I can't tell you the truth. Like, what do I say to this? And I'm racking my brain. I'm like, what do I say? I can't just say it's Alzheimer's. We can't do anything. And I'm like, oh, Mum, okay, yeah, you're really religious. Mum's like, yeah. And I'm like, cool, so where's she gonna go when she dies? Mum's like, she's gonna go to heaven. And I'm like, sweet, okay. So who's she gonna see when she goes to heaven? She's like, she's gonna see her son. And I'm like, yeah, so this is really sad for us. We're saying goodbye. But she gets to say hello to her son again. And in YA, we always take the piss out of it, where we're like, oh, she let out the breath she didn't know she was holding. And I hear my mum on the phone just go, and there was that staggered breath, and she was like, oh, if I think about that, I can get through this. And it was, I had grown up, I had seen my mum parent us quite strictly. I'd seen my grandmother parent us quite strictly with the wooden spoon. I'd seen, my mum begin to parent my grandmother, but this was the first time I had been asked to parent and comfort my mum. And then I sat back, and after that phone call, I was like, that's my way through this story. Right? It was ways I could tie my reflections on my past with my experience as an author, because I wanted to become an author to help out my mum and my grandmother to sort of pay for things. Wrong career, should have invested in crypto. But that was the thing, and all that sort of came together and became that book. But it was because that was the way I was looking at the world in that moment. And so, be open to experiences. If an idea isn't working, leave it. Go for a walk. You don't know what you're going to see. You don't know what's going to inspire you. And, I hope life presents you with things that you can then use. I hope it isn't an Alzheimer's diagnosis, they are not fun, but I hope it is something that will suddenly just pull you into the story, because the best stories are the ones where there is a truth embedded in it. It doesn't have to be about your life, it's about something that has passed through you and affected you, and I think those are the stories that really link up.
All right, my lovies. What is a piece of advice you would have for aspiring authors, and what piece of advice would you give to yourself as an aspiring author when you were younger? Anyone?
No, you go.
No.
Hold on a second.
Okay. Look, I mean, the only way, okay, read everything, read widely, read passionately, and take notes, and then write as much as you can. And I hate giving advice. This doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah, but it was asked for, so not giving unsolicited
Okay.
advice.
And don't take any advice from anyone who tries to tell you how to do this.
You laugh, but it's true. There's so many aspiring authors are just desperate for that golden ticket. Like, how do we do this? We've struggled with it. So, like, none of us have the answer. What works for me, it may work for you. It also may not. But I know for my younger aspiring author self, it takes as long as it takes, because I put so much pressure. As I said, it took me years to do my first book, and I was really quite cruel to myself and hard on myself because of that. Even now, you know, I'm not a book a year person. I wish I could be, but I'm just not. And the industry kind of, I don't know, but you feel pressured to do that. And if you don't, you feel like you've dropped the ball in some way. And it's like, hang on, like some of those 2 years, it's still the big story to do. And I should be proud of that. We're made to feel like we failed in some way because we haven't met that impossible thing of doing an 80,000 word book every single year. So just go easy on yourself. It takes as long as it takes. And try not to let the noise distract you. It's so noisy now with social media and everything like that, and you're showing what, I mean, I even hear it from some of the authors, like, this person's getting that and that person's getting that, and it's just so noisy. And it's like, just block all of that out. The work is what matters most. Your relationship to the text, the manuscript that you're writing, and the connection you then form with readers. That's what kind of fuels me.
I think you guys have said most of the important things, and I think there's just one piece of advice that I don't remember who said it originally, but I found it really useful. When someone is telling you that something you've written isn't working, their solution is probably wrong.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're seeing a problem is probably right. You know, listen to that feedback and go from there. And yeah, just write, just do it.
Amazing. The next question for you all: do you have a writing playlist? And if so, can you tell us at least one song on it?
I am such a writing playlist person. Above all other forms of inspiration, I was an absolute terror for my editorial team when we were having the conversations around putting together the cover. And my lovely editor was like, so, you know, do you have like mood boards and like send through inspiration images? And I was like, oh no, I'm not really a visual person. And they were like, you know, like what do the characters like look like? So what's their hair color? I don't know. But I can send you a 6-hour playlist. And I am so audio based when I write. Yeah. And so what I tend to do is, as I'm writing, I will add songs to a playlist specific to that manuscript, and it will kind of end up being this relationship between the sound and the words, where each playlist has a distinct sound. And by the same token, so the longer I'm writing a manuscript, if I hear a song out in the wild, it will make me think of that manuscript because the sound that has become so distinct in my mind. So each of my, if you want to get the idea of like how I was feeling and what the vibe would be if you're reading, you have to listen to what I was listening to. It's very symbiotic.
Can I ask lyrics? Songs with lyrics?
Yes, it can be a mixture, but yes, songs with lyrics. When I was writing my very first novel, when I was, which I started at the ripe old age of 9 and I finished at the ancient age of 12, I listened to I believe, a just found on YouTube. It was called Epic Playlist in all caps. And that was a lot of film and sound, sort of soundtrack stuff. So for that manuscript, it was all just instrumental. But now it's sort of branched out and will be very dependent on the manuscript, but mostly the book.
Yeah, I can't wait unless you keep on talking.
Yeah, music is such a huge part of my creative process. I cannot listen to lyrics though, because I end up going to the bathroom and just singing, because I find that and that's a bit, if you ever stopped, go to the bathroom and just belt out a few tunes, it kind of loosens up everything on the inside. But yeah, orchestral stuff, so film scores and gaming scores as well. The decision to get YouTube Premium for me, this is not paid content, but the best decision of my life, once I got rid of those ads, the beautiful thing about YouTube is there are gaming scores that people do, and some of them run for 10 hours, and you can get any fantasy kind of soundscape you want. There's music for that. And there's a guy called Michael Gelfi, Gelfi. He does these soundscapes for Dungeons and Dragons things. Literally any fantasy scenario you can imagine, there is a soundscape for that. So during mine, you can even combine them by opening up two windows. So for the submarine sequence in book 3, I was listening to old-timey submarine sounds with music playing and just being like a little DJ in my living room. But yeah, absolutely such a huge part of my process.
Anybody else want to contribute? No?
It is absolutely not a part of my process. Yeah, I can't handle music while writing. That's it.
All right, folks. Which fictional characters from your childhood gave you hope, joy, or inspiration? It's going to be a tough one for you, Will.
See, that's the thing. I think it's not hard. Like I did relish it. I guess that's joy. But for me, it was Granny Weatherwax, Terry Pratchett, just always finding herself in a really incredible situation and then smarting her way out of it, usually by taking advantage of somebody's foolishness. Like, just love it. I'd love to write a character like that one day.
Anybody else have anything they want to contribute?
Babysitter's Club all the way. Every single one of them.
What was it again?
So, which fictional characters from your childhood gave you hope, joy, or inspiration?
Alan Grant in Jurassic Park.
Amazing. This one's going to be very simple. What's your favourite colour?
Green.
Nice.
Green too.
Me too.
Teal.
Does my hair give it away? Yeah, green.
All right, folks. This one you're in a perfect position to help us with. Do you need a literary agent traditionally to be published? And also, by the way, Erin Goff, I read Amelia Westlake while attending a private all-girls school. Great experience.
You don't need a literary agent, but it is. I think if I did my time again as a 17-year-old, I would definitely have got one. And the reason why I said that was I remember when things were getting really rough with my first publisher, you talk to your editor, especially when you're in the thick of it, like at the pointy end, it's almost like every day, like you're emailing back and forth as you're sort of finalising everything. And something wasn't going quite right, and my editor goes, "Oh, William, I think you need an agent because you need an advocate." And I was like, "Oh no, you're my advocate. You're the person I'm working with." And I'm like, "Oh no, she's the advocate for the publisher." And so, especially for the younger people in the audience who are considering publication, please don't. I don't need any more nemesis. No. But yes, try to reach out to agents, and it allows you to you can't pitch to an agent unless you really understand your idea. And you really it's almost like you're stress testing it before you give it to a publisher. So it's not essential, but I think having somebody there who understands the industry, because there are things I'm still learning about the industry 20 years in. It's really good to have an agent, and plus, it's the benefit of, if I'm trying to get my publisher to do something, it's harder than, because I just have however many books I have with the publisher, but an agent has a stable of authors, and you don't want to piss off the person with the stable of authors. So, yeah.
I published my first 2 books without an agent. So my first book was published as part of effectively I won an unpublished manuscript award called the Ampersand Prize through Huddy Grant, and I'm still with them. So it was a very positive experience, and I worked through 2 book processes, and I negotiated my 2 contracts using basically somebody who was an agent but also did freelance contract advice. So they didn't take a commission from my advance. I just paid them a flat fee, which wasn't very much, and they suggested things that I might be able to negotiate on, and I kind of did that myself. Then for my third novel, I thought, look, I'd like to try and get an agent who perhaps could help me reach a broader audience, particularly internationally. And I also, at this time, I had been approached about an option for a film for my second novel, and it was something that I knew nothing about the film industry. So I needed somebody to help negotiate that. And so that was why I got an agent at that point. And the other thing that an agent can do is negotiate your advance. So overnight, my advance went from $2 to $4, which was fabulous. It's not actually two, but it doubled. And that was just because I had someone else negotiating for me. But that said, look, people do say we have a very small market here, and it's, 15% is what agents take from your kind of advances. And people are in two minds. Like, I know people that have done perfectly well without agents, but I think it is about, it's good to have someone between you and the publisher if you do get into a sticky situation. If you're the kind of person, though, who is very comfortable handling conflict, then you could probably manage it yourself. So I'm undecided, really.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you. Yeah, it's not a one size fits all for every author and the agent. Some authors love having them, some don't feel the need to do it, and that's fine. But yeah, agents are different as well. And so when you are researching, trying to find someone, do look at their list to see if they do similar things. Also think about what you would like from an agent. I've had an agent next year, it'll be 10 years, and we have a great relationship. I don't need my agent's help on the creative stuff, but I know that some authors do have that relationship with their agent where they do talk about the creative thing, about what to do next and everything like that. But yeah, it is amazing to just have that person in your corner, take care of the business side, but also, aside from the publishers, having that somebody to step in to bat for you. Like, I know we've had experiences where we experience homophobia going to schools and things like that. I had an awful incident last year, and I wanted to write a reply to this. Long story short, a principal had sent an email out to all the parents expressing their extreme disappointment that an author revealed details of their sexuality. I'd said I'm an out and proud gay man and talked about queer positive representation in books. It caused a big stir. That moment, though, I was devastated. But when my agent said, "Jem, you don't have to deal with this person. I'm here." And because I'd been really, as really freaking out, just that moment, I'd almost started crying there. And then, so just having that someone in your corner always, whether it's dealing with publishing or just the other nonsense that we have to deal with out there as queer authors, as any kind of author, I guess, I find it invaluable, but it's not for everyone.
All right, folks, next question is, what's your favourite trope and why?
Like the tropiest person. No.
Anyone wants to start?
Well, as a big romance fan, I have some key tropes that I really enjoy, but my favourite, and it often ends up in my writing, is that kind of the friends to lovers arc. I love writing it, especially. I don't know if I gravitate to it as much in the media that I consume, but the dynamics I write are almost always friends to lovers. There's something about complicating a pre-existing platonic relationship, especially a long-running one, with romance that I find really compelling to get into.
Anybody else? Alrighty, next question. How do you get to know your own characters?
I mean, they kind of don't give me a choice, to be honest. They're very noisy up there, always making me do things and write things. I think the way that I get to know my characters is by putting them up against each other. I develop characterization by having characters have dialogues or be in scenes together, and then in that process of them bouncing off each other, it helps me clarify their own singular voices, how they respond to situations, things like that. So it's in writing multiple characters that I come to understand each individual character.
You guys have anything to add?
My characters always kind of start with, I take a little piece of myself and I'm like, okay, I'm going to build something around there. And so I always have an in, but then it's like, okay, but I've divorced that part of myself from everything else. How then do I make them distinct? And so usually in the first draft, everyone kind of sounds the same. And then in the second draft, I kind of layer it. It's like just I'm painting. And so I keep going back over and over and over again. So like sometimes I'll have a character, I'm like, I know exactly who that character is. But sometimes I'll be writing, I'm like, I have no idea. You are just a function of the plot. But you can give yourself the freedom to discover it as you go. And then, because the wonderful thing is, we're not those authors who are going to lie to you and say, I birthed this perfect story once. It came out fully formed. No, you get to go back and go, okay, cool. I kind of know the shape of the story now. Who's the most interesting person that this person can be? Thinking about how they behave in the story. So then they're not just doing the thing that the plot dictates, but they're doing something that's innate to them and that's affecting the story. But just don't panic if they don't immediately come to you. You're sketching. It's the first draft. Odds are you're going to cut them out in draft 2. But let them kind of audition. The first draft is the audition.
Yeah, I feel as if what I enjoy as a reader and also as a writer is the characters of the novel. I try to make an engaging plot and tell an interesting tale, but I really want people to engage with the characters. And for me to get to know characters, it's just about spending time with them. And as Will said, building upon them in every draft. And so there's always a process when I'm writing a novel where I will do a draft read which focuses on one character at a time, and I'll just go through and I'll revisit the scenes with that character, and then I'll do another read through and revisit it with the next character to make sure that they're really coming alive. And I think if you can hone them to an extent that they're instantly recognisable on the page for the reader every time they appear in the scene, and there's something that you can anticipate that they're going to express or say or be wearing or be feeling, it's truly magic because it really does engage you. So I really spend quite a lot of time on the characters.
Yeah, I agree with everything. Just to add, I think it's important to stress that it's not just the protagonist we're talking about. Like, giving your supporting characters agency can often just unlock new pathways through the story and unlock things for your protagonist as well. Just make sure all of the players have their own agency in the story, their own backstories, their own kind of reason for being there.
Well, since you honour your characters so well, this is going to be an easy one. What is your main character's default pizza order?
I don't know. I'm just going to go Hawaiian. That's mine.
Meat lovers.
Yeah, meat lovers.
Hawaiian with olives.
All right, this
I don't
one.
get the rules.
That's a supreme, right?
I feel we've touched on this already, but this is a beautiful question. Does the creative process of writing help you on your own path as a queer person, and is that freeing?
Yes. So I remember writing the sidekicks, being like, okay, I'm going to write about coming out because I'm a little bit emboldened, but I'm not going to come out to anyone. And I gave my character, his name was Ryan, and he was a swimmer, and he didn't want to come out because he didn't want people to look at him and see a rainbow, but he didn't want people to look at him and see a lie. That could have been me wrestling with being an openly queer writer. And so as I wrote him, and as he became more confident in himself, as he came out to his friends and family, I built up the courage. And then as I was writing that book, I came out to my mum and my friends and my family. And then when the book was released, I was like, okay, cool, but I'm still not going to come out. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, I've written a book about, 3 boys who, after having experienced grief, are then pushed to live more openly. And one of those characters is queer. I can't then write that and be like, hi, I'm Will. I have a girlfriend and I'm masked. So it was that felt like I was, so that book and that book's theme forced me to sort of step up. And yes, there were consequences to that. which Jeremy has alluded to. It's, you know, it's dicey out there at some schools, but I'm really glad that I did it because it has made me somebody who is more confident in themselves and happier with who I am, and yeah.
Yeah, I think creating fiction, even the bits that I never shared, were pivotal in my own journey coming to terms with myself. I remember there was a manuscript I started writing when I was, I don't know, like 13 or 14, and it was very of the like old Wattpad day mold, where you had a ferociously unpleasant male love interest. And a clumsy little female protagonist, and I wrote this scene where they have this meeting in the rain, and this is the first time they've seen each other for years, and it's meant to be romantically tense, and it's just a bit, you know, whatever. I remember when I was coming to terms with my own identity, I hadn't verbalized it yet, not in my mind, not out loud, and I remember rereading this scene and these like 4 chapters of this mess, and coming to this scene, and I copy and pasted that scene into another document, and I just changed the pronouns. I made it 2 women, and I did that, and then I read it, and then I closed it and I put it away, and that was like, I still remember that as like a really key moment in my journey coming to terms with myself and reading those words, and even though the characters were atrocious, going, this is right, actually. This feels right.
I love that. I think part of the writing process for me is, you know, you build worlds as a writer, and I think for me, when I write, I'm building my own world, and I'm exploring ways of being that, once I've written them, become possible because they're written down and you've made them dramatically plausible. So they can happen in real life, and they can happen to me as well as to the readers who pick up the book. And so it's liberating because, and this is the thing that I've always loved about writing, is you can make up whatever you want within reason. But it's a way of exploring possibilities and exploring them in fictional worlds, but also in a way that can make them real in the real world.
Yeah, I agree very much about exploring, but also for me, and I'm sure you will agree, but also very healing for me as a gay man. Like I grew up in a country town in New South Wales in Griffith, and I grew up without access to queer stories at all. In Griffith, we only had 2 channels, like 2 TV channels, and the only time I did see a gay man was not me. Like, it was a very kind of stereotypical gay man kind of thing. And I did have some internalized homophobia when I was younger as well, and that took some unpacking to do. And now, I remember when I first came out, I couldn't even say the words, I'm gay. I had a gay friend. I told him on the phone that I was gay. When I caught up with him in person, I still could not voice the word. We had an entire hangout, and afterwards the message going, what the hell was that? And we caught up again when rock climbing, and still at the end, I still hadn't been able to say it. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And the car finally just basically shouted, I'm gay, that kind of thing. But now, having written these stories and seeing the difference in generations, particularly for me in 2023, I was lucky enough to do the secondary school days for Sydney Writers Festival, talking to hundreds of teens, high schoolers, and the amount of queer joy in the room and in the signing line afterwards, the amount of students coming up just telling me their queer stories, telling me like how proud they were of me as well. Like, it's so healing for me as well when I think about my life, and it blows my mind that the stories that I have been so, and I know you'd all agree for your books, been so influential for young minds, and we're giving them what, in a way, we didn't get to have ourselves. That's so beautiful, but I don't think they know, the readers know, how much it means for us authors to hear that kind of stuff and how healing that is every single time we hear it.
Well, I'm hoping at least one of you has an answer for this one. Do your novels ever become a wish fulfillment? For example, if you're writing a romance novel, do you ever project real life inspo hypotheticals into your story?
So much of it is wish fulfillment for me, just because about exploring and I like going to this booby trap labyrinth. It's what I want to have happen in my life. Like I've always loved action movies, and I want to experience what Jane does, even though it would be horrific. A lot of it is, particularly during the pandemic, writing. How do you write a fun, rollicking action adventure novel when you're stuck in an apartment you can't leave? Quill of All Tales, the green one, was 100% wish fulfillment. I want to go to a jungle and run around.
Yeah, totally. I think, your imagination goes places that you want to be, and then you make it real, as I was saying, by writing it down. But one thing that I would say is that might be the kernel of an idea for me, but things tend to move beyond that. So once you kind of, structuring a story and making sure that everything fits and really working out how characters need to develop, so much changes from that initial kernel that it can often, generally it becomes quite different.
I guess the wish fulfillment for me isn't like, oh my god, can I put in someone tall, dark and handsome? It's more just, I get to live a queer childhood. I did live a queer childhood, but I can redo it without the shame. Yeah. Right? I don't have to hide myself. I don't have to lie to my friends and family. I don't have to be afraid, and I don't have to do all of that stuff. So I get to kind of have a redo, and that was my sincere answer. My more truthful answer is I also get to do revenge fulfillment. So if you piss me off, I will hold on to it until it becomes a diamond, right? And then it will go into a book, and people will ask me if it's you, and I'll be coy, and I will say no. But you will know, and I will know. Don't mess with me.
That makes me think of the line, you probably think this song is about you, don't you?
Oh, hey. That's one of my favourite songs.
What is your favourite scene that you couldn't include in one of your books?
Oh, yes.
I think Erin had.
Yes.
Okay, in The Flywheel, which is my first novel, I had this really long scene that was about all of the kind of main characters were reenacting spontaneously the musical Les Miserables. And I went on for 3 pages. And I think my editor made me cut it down to 2 lines. And I think about that scene to this day.
Mine has nothing to do with being gay. It's just I really wanted a minecart chase sequence in book 4, and I tried, I just couldn't fit it. So at some point I will write one, but that was because it's such an iconic adventure kind of thing. But I have in my mind what happened. This thing, when we delete these things, they get to live on in our imaginations, but yeah, not for the readers, unfortunately.
Next question. Have you ever attempted screenwriting, and if so, how did it go?
I studied writing at uni. I actually majored in screenwriting, and so I wrote a feature film for my honours dissertation, which I'm sure is terrible. I haven't looked back on it now. But yeah, I actually think for any aspiring authors out there, take a look at screenwriting. It can teach you so much, because it's all about the economy of words, about visual storytelling. I learned so much about structure and plot and pacing through screenwriting rather than the actual kind of short story component of the degree. So I found it incredibly helpful.
I'm going to say that as a aspiring novelist, having written short stories for many, many years, I really struggled with structuring a novel when I started. Refer back to the 8 years spent writing a terrible novel. And what actually taught me about structure was I read screenplay books. But then when my second novel, Amelia Westlake, was optioned for film, there was a discussion about whether I should write the screenplay. I mean, when I say there was discussion, I said to my agent, should I write the screenplay? And she said no. But people have done it really well. Like Melina Marketa, to take an example, has made a very successful career out of doing screenplays for television. And I'd love to give it a crack, but I actually never have.
I have there was a producer who wanted to turn one of my books into a TV series, and we kept sort of bouncing. It was just drafting, and it was just this idea of you know, writing, bouncing back. It was a great experience for me. And then it was like, we went for funding and then we got pipped at the post at the end because someone filled out an Excel spreadsheet wrong. And I'm just like, actually, you know what? I get rejected enough in publishing. I get rejected enough when I walk into a school and I'm like, has anyone heard of me? And you just hear crickets and you see the tumbleweed roll across the gym. And I'm like, I can't do this in another medium. Like, this is too painful. I think if I ever do any sort of screenwriting, it's going to be like avoidant screenwriting, like George R.R. Martin, where it's like, oh my God, I don't know how to finish my series. Let me just keep making TV shows until everyone forgets. Well, that's my plan for it anyway.
Have I? No. Might I? Maybe. If I did, though, it would probably be in a totally different genre. Like, I genuinely think that were I to write a screenplay, it would end up being a piece of horror, probably.
But also, just to add, you read a lot of the YA that's coming out of the US at the moment, especially contemporary, and they're basically screenplays. Like, you read it, it's like, I stepped outside, it's exterior, daytime, dialogue for 3 pages. And I'm just like, this is not a book. But then you go on Book Talk and people are like, I don't read the prose, I just read the dialogue. I don't know why this book doesn't make sense. And I'm like, well, let me tell you why it doesn't make sense. You're missing all the interiority. So it feels like we're moving more towards that anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, sorry to add on that.
It is literally happening that because a lot of producers are only wanting to make content with existing IP. So I bought a book. God, I'm mental blanking on the movie. Help me out. It was Henry Cavill and Bryce Dallas Howard. It was a spy thing. Came out last year. Argo. I bought that book from my bookshop, my local bookshop. Puts my books, and was excited to read it because it said it was from a debut author. It even had a note at the start saying I'm a debut author. I read the first couple of pages and this is awful. I then looked online. It was a complete sham. They had pretended they'd hired a mid-list crime author, I don't know who it was, and pretended, like, created a pseudonym, created a debut novelist because they knew that they thought that would grease the wheels and get people more. So, because the movie was had already wrapped production when the book came out, so it just didn't make sense. So I actually took the book back and just said, like, they lied. Can I swap it for something else? And they said, yeah, sure. Because I'm not going to read that crap. Like, so it's actively happening. People are writing these things from screenplays first, not to write a book just because they want to write a book, to get the movie done.
We're going to have a few questions left, folks, and I think Sasha's already admitted to this one, but do you ever get distracted by a bunch of ideas you want to write but have to focus on just one? Or extra point, I think Da Vinci experienced a similar thing with his paintings, so I just wanted to ask.
I'm one at a time.
I have just handed in a manuscript draft to my editors, and look, I think I'm going to spend the next few days just doing another thing, like just working on another thing. As I said, I do have a lot of unfinished things on my computer, and sometimes if you haven't looked at something for years and you go back to it and it still reads like you really enjoy reading it, like I'll get back into it. And actually, that's how the Flywheel was written, because it was on the first 3 chapters were on my computer for about a decade before I kind of revisited them, and the voice really struck me as something worth, carrying on with. And so I will dabble a lot, but I think there are times, as Sasha has said, when and generally because you've got a deadline for something, but it does really help to just get into the zone with one thing at some point in the process. You've got to just get that continuity and just write through without any distractions.
When I was a teenager, I was like scattershot. I had too many ideas. I had notebooks full of it, and I felt like, oh my God, I'll never be able to write all of these. Now it's like the well is dry. I am running around going, please, idea, come to me. Someone piss me off. Give me something to write about. And the ideas eventually come, and then they just kind of take over. And what I end up finding is all those orphan small ideas, they end up merging into some Frankenstein monster, and it's my sort of job to make sure it doesn't look like it's 7 ideas stitched together into one.
Yeah, I'll admit it, I'm terrible for this. I will say, never under contract. I am a very diligent writer. When I'm under contract, it is that story, and I'm really, really brave about it. I won't stray. But when I'm not under contract, my mind naturally jumps between things. And I find that's fine. That tends to work well for me. So I feel slightly embarrassed to admit I have 6 manuscripts on the go currently across genres. Yes. So, yep. Yeah, I know. All between 25 and 50,000 words. Wow. Yes. So I'm just really hoping that if I continue on this path, in like 5 years' time, I'm going to have like 4 things at once to sell, and it's going to be great. And that's what I'm telling myself. This is a strategy and not a problem.
It's a long game. It's a long game. What settings are your favourite to write?
So the book that I'm working on at the moment is set in my home suburb of Marrickville, and I have so enjoyed it because I live in Marrickville, and so in order to do research I just have to walk around, and there's lots of cool things happening there, and lots of quirky weirdness about the suburb as well. But I think the better I know a setting, the more richly I can write about it, so I'm loving that.
For me, writing the Jane Doe series, because I've always loved travel and adventure and things like that, and having the ability to have this place called the Manor and have it be a portal to all these different worlds was, like I said, wish fulfillment for me. And so the first one is set mainly inside the labyrinth, but the second one was the desert book. I love deserts. I kind of grew up in the desert. So being able to play in that giant literal sandpit was amazing. But book 3, I love jungles as well, so I could go there. So that was amazing. But for me, it's always been about taking people out of the ordinary world. Even the book I'm writing now, well, I'll just say, like, I'm writing a gay rom-com, like a desert island kind of thing, and that is so fun. And again, it's just interesting. I'm always taking people out of the ordinary world into some form of some adventurous kind of thing. But it's just really important. I love the amount of notes we're taking, by the way. Just to make sure that each setting you go to, even in a fantasy thing, really delve into the history of that place. Make it, like, draw from your own experiences to make it feel real and lived in, because that'll really resonate with readers.
I should say my second novel, Amelia Westlake, was very fun setting-wise because I was able to draw upon my experience of attending a private girls' school, and that was hugely fun to kind of really amp up, the bells and whistles of the private school. That was definitely an advantage to have lived that.
Congrats. All right, I have one final question I'd love to hear from all of you on this one. What or who inspired you to be and inspired you to stay an author?
Oh, I mean, I don't think I really had a choice. I think my brain was going to continue to hold me hostage with ideas until I got them down. I think anxious people often become authors. If I'm not creating imaginary scenarios for fictional people, I'm creating imaginary scenarios for me, a real person, and that creates problems. So I would say that my anxiety is my motivating force, probably.
In terms of an author, it would be Enid Blyton. Like, I remember reading The Magic Faraway Tree as a kid and being like, holy crap, I want to do that. But in terms of from my life, I'm always, brought back to the dining table in my grandmother's house in Carlingford. And I had my grandfather, he would do a cleaning shift at the State Bank, back when we had that. And he finished the shift at overnight, and then he would wait outside the news agency until it opened. And then when it opened, he would buy exercise books. And he would have the little, for those of you that are too young to remember, when you used to go to a bank, you had these little pencils and you would fill out little withdrawal forms. And so he'd swipe some of the pencils, and he gave my brothers and I each an exercise book after breakfast, and he'd say, just write. And he would watch us. My grandparents were people who grew up, and not in towns, they grew up on a dirt road with like 2 houses on it, right? Like, I visited my grandmother's old village, and my aunt was there. And she was like, that is the hill your great-grandmother was born on. That is the shed your grandmother was born on. That was the kitchen once, but now it's where the chickens live. And it was just such the span of her entire life before she came to Australia was about 150 steps. And then they came to Australia without being able to read or write. And then they tried to build a life for us, and they instilled in us the importance of education. And, my grandfather was there And I remember him watching us, like we were like, my brothers and I were 3, 5, and 7. We could not write, we were just scribbling or whatever. But he was staring at us, and I remember the look on his face because he knew our lives were going to be a little bit easier than his. And it was like, my grandmother would drive us around and she would stop. There would be a sign that would say, Woolloomooloo, right? And she would sound out the W and the O, and she'd get there and she'd go, Waterloo. And I'd be like, oh, it's wrong, but no, you got it. And she'd look so proud. And like, she was of the generation where, you know, illiteracy was the norm, right? And I think growing up with people who remembered that and who struggled with that, I think that set me on a path to really value the written word.
I'd like to shout out a couple of really supportive primary school teachers that I had, actually, because I think writing was something that I always loved, and reading from a very early age. I think I decided I wanted to be a writer when I was 4. But it wasn't, I think my parents were understandably nervous about my chosen career path. And so it really was when I got to school and was writing creatively for school that I got such encouragement from my teachers. And that just boosted me, and it set me on that path, because I thought, you know, this is something that they see value in, and they see that it's something that I'm passionate about and that I can do, and that was enough. And I think about that often, and I feel very grateful that I had those people in my life to inspire and encourage me.
For me, it's Michael Crichton. We all have that first big reading experience that opened doorways. My brother bought me The Lost World, which is the sequel to Jurassic Park. It was the first hardcover, like big adult book that I ever read, and it took me 3 days to get through, and it just absolutely blew my mind and changed my life, because that set me down a big, like through most of my teens, I just read Michael Crichton, which led me to Stephen King and Matthew Riley and those kinds of books, and that it was everyone just think, if you could redo one reading experience again, what would it be? For me, it would 100% be The Lost World. Loved it.
Amazing. Well, that comes to the end of all of our questions. So I'd like to thank all of our amazing authors. Thanks for coming in and sharing your expertise, your experience, and yourself with everyone here. Thank you, everybody, for writing such amazing questions. I think I learned something too, this little dum-dum over here. Thank you to the amazing library staff for putting this event on. Now, we do have some rainbow cupcakes. You are welcome to stick around, meet our panelists. You're welcome to take photos with them. And also, we have the fabulous Anna from Constant Reader over here on the side. She's got all of our panelists' books for sale, so if you want to get them purchased and signed, don't be shy. So thank you very much for joining us today, and happy Pride, everyone.
And thank you for coming. Thank you so much for coming.
So I wrote it up and then
I can do one.
it was cartoon. No, I just sneak into one. It's like, okay, we've got your noise on.
Just on there. Are you a writer yourself? Yeah, what kind of stuff do you write? Yeah. So yeah, that was such a great song. Oh, I love it. Oh no, wait, I did the wrong one. Wait.
I'm not gonna
It's a lot of cheap perfume.
Doesn't smell
Oh, I get something. Thank you. No, I'm okay. I can't remember lipstick. But thank you. I'm okay.
People tell me to breathe slowly.